The morning Emma Davis stepped through the glass doors of Westridge Academy, she did not know that within 3 hours, her life would fracture into a before and an after that would change everything she believed about justice, loyalty, and the terrible weight of silence. She was 14 years old, wearing her mother's old wool coat because the heating bill had come late again, and her backpack was held together with safety pins in hope. The coat smelled faintly of lavender, a ghost of comfort in a building that had never felt like home. Emma kept her head down as she walked through the main hallway, counting the tiles beneath her worn sneakers. She had learned early that invisibility was survival at Westridge, a private academy where tuition cost more than her father's annual salary. She was there on scholarship, a fact that followed her like a shadow, whispered behind cupped hands in every classroom and hallway. The scholarship kid. The charity case. The one who didn't belong. The lockers lined the corridor like metallic sentinels, each one a fortress of privilege. Designer bags spilled out of half-open doors. The latest smartphones gleamed in manicured hands. Emma's locker was at the far end, away from the prime real estate near the cafeteria where the popular students congregated like royalty holding court. She spun the combination lock with practiced efficiency, keeping her eyes focused on the task. She did not see Madison Pierce approaching until it was too late. Madison was the queen of Westridge Academy, not through academic excellence or athletic achievement, but through the sheer force of her family's wealth and her own ruthless charisma. She moved through the school like she owned it, which, considering her father sat on the board of trustees, was not far from the truth. Madison had blonde hair that caught the light like spun gold, perfect teeth courtesy of 3 years of invisible braces, and eyes that could cut through steel when she wanted them to. "Nice coat," Madison said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. She stood close enough that Emma could smell her expensive perfume, a scent that probably cost more than Emma's entire wardrobe. "Is that vintage? Or just old?" The girls flanking Madison laughed on cue. There were always girls flanking Madison. Sarah and Jessica, her loyal lieutenants, who mimicked her movements and amplified her cruelty like human echo chambers. Emma's fingers tightened on her locker door. "It's my mother's," she said quietly, refusing to meet Madison's eyes. She had learned that engagement only fueled the fire. "Oh, how sweet," Madison cooed, reaching out to touch the worn fabric. "I love charity shop chic. It's so brave of you to wear it anyway." The emphasis on the word brave landed like a slap. Emma pulled away, but Madison's hand lingered, pinching the fabric between her fingers with theatrical disgust. The hallway was filling with students now, morning traffic flowing around them like water around stones. Some glanced over, registered the familiar scene of Madison tormenting Emma, and quickly looked away. Complicity through silence. Emma had counted on that pattern for 2 years, the predictable rhythm of humiliation that never quite crossed into territory severe enough to warrant adult intervention. But today felt different. There was an electricity in the air, a sharpness to Madison's smile that Emma recognized as dangerous. "I heard your dad drives a delivery truck now," Madison continued, her voice carrying just loud enough for the growing audience to hear. "That must be so embarrassing for you." "My dad was just saying how hard it must be for people like that. People who have to work with their hands because they don't have the skills for real careers." Emma's jaw clenched. Her father, Marcus Davis, was a long-haul truck driver who spent 18 hours a day on dangerous highways to keep a roof over their heads. He was the most honorable man Emma knew, a man who had taught her that dignity came from within, not from bank accounts or country club memberships. "My father works hard," Emma said, her voice steady despite the heat rising in her chest. "That's nothing to be ashamed of." Madison's smile sharpened. "Oh, I'm not ashamed. You are. I can see it written all over your face every single day. You walk around here like you're apologizing for existing, like you know you don't belong. She leaned in closer, her breath hot against Emma's ear. And you're right. You don't belong here. This school is for people with futures, not people counting pennies for lunch money. The words hit their mark with surgical precision. Emma had been eating peanut butter sandwiches from home for 2 years because the cafeteria prices were astronomical. She had worn the same 3 outfits in rotation, washing them by hand in her bathroom sink to save quarters at the laundromat. Every aspect of her poverty was visible, cataloged, weaponized. Sarah giggled. I saw her notebook yesterday. She writes poetry? Like really sad poetry about rain and windows. It's pathetic. The violation of privacy stung worse than the mockery. Emma's notebook was her sanctuary, the only place she allowed herself to be vulnerable. The realization that they had gone through her belongings while she was in gym class made her stomach turn. You went through my stuff? Emma's voice cracked, the first real emotion breaking through her careful composure. That's stealing. Madison shrugged, utterly unbothered. Stealing implies your things are worth anything. We were just curious about what goes on in that weird little head of yours. She tapped Emma's forehead with one perfectly manicured finger. Turns out, not much. Just a lot of whining about how hard your life is. Jessica pulled out her phone, scrolling through something with a smirk. We should post some of them. The internet would eat up this melodramatic garbage. Emma's blood went cold. Her poetry was raw, unfiltered expressions of pain and loneliness that she had never intended for anyone to see. The thought of those words being shared online, dissected by strangers, made her feel physically sick. Don't, Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. Please don't. Madison's eyes gleamed with satisfaction at the desperation in Emma's voice. This was what she wanted, this display of powerlessness. Oh, now you're begging. That's more like it. The first bell rang, a shrill electronic sound that usually signaled relief. But Madison did not move. She stood in front of Emma's locker, blocking her exit, while students flowed around them toward their homerooms. Emma tried to sidestep her, but Sarah moved to block that path too. They had her cornered, a predator's strategy executed with casual cruelty. You know what your problem is, Emma? Madison said, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper that somehow felt more threatening than her earlier volume. You think if you keep your head down and work hard, eventually people will respect you. But that's not how the world works. Some people are leaders and some people are followers. And some people, she paused, letting her eyes travel deliberately up and down Emma's second-hand clothes, are just background noise. Emma felt something inside her crack. It was not the first time Madison had targeted her, but it was the most vicious. 2 years of accumulated slights and casual cruelties had built a wall of scar tissue around Emma's heart. But this felt different. This felt like Madison was trying to erase her entirely. I need to get to class, Emma said, her voice flat. She had learned that emotion gave them ammunition. Madison finally stepped aside, but not before delivering her parting shot. Don't forget, we have group presentations in history today. You're in my group, remember? Try not to embarrass us with whatever thrift store outfit you've cobbled together for the occasion. Emma grabbed her books and walked away, her legs shaky but still functional. Behind her, she heard Madison's laugh, bright and carefree, as if she had not just spent 10 minutes systematically trying to destroy another human being's sense of self-worth. The hallway felt impossibly long. Every face Emma passed seemed to hold judgment or pity, and she was not sure which was worse. She made it to the bathroom just as her composure shattered. The stall door closed behind her with a click that echoed in the empty tiled space. Emma sat on the closed toilet lid, her textbook clutched against her chest like armor, and allowed herself exactly 3 minutes to cry. 3 minutes to acknowledge the hurt, to feel the unfairness of being punished for circumstances beyond her control. 3 minutes to wish she had been born into a different life. Then she wiped her face with rough paper towels, squared her shoulders, and walked to first period. She had survived Madison Pierce for 2 years. She would survive today. What Emma did not know was that Madison's campaign had only just begun, and by lunchtime, the entire school would be watching Emma's humiliation unfold in real time. The history classroom was a study in controlled chaos when Emma arrived, deliberately choosing a seat in the back corner, where she could observe without being observed. Mr. Patterson was writing on the board in his characteristic, barely legible scrawl, something about the causes of the Civil War, while students filed in with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Madison swept in like she was walking a runway, her designer skirt swishing around her knees, trailed by her ever-present entourage. She caught Emma's eye across the room and smiled, a predator's smile that promised nothing good. Emma looked away, focusing on arranging her notebook and pen with unnecessary precision. Mr. Patterson turned from the board, clapping his hands once to get everyone's attention. He was a young teacher, probably in his early 30s, with the kind of optimistic energy that had not yet been crushed by the bureaucratic machinery of private education. "All right. Everyone settle down," Mr. Patterson said, checking his attendance sheet. "Today we're presenting the group projects on Civil War battles. Each group has 10 minutes to present their assigned battle and its significance. First up, we have Madison's group covering Gettysburg." Emma's stomach dropped. She had forgotten about the presentation. Not really forgotten. She had been dreading it for weeks, but she had pushed it to the back of her mind because confronting it meant confronting the reality of working with Madison. The project was worth 20% of their grade, a fact that made Emma's scholarship status feel even more precarious. Madison stood gracefully, gathering her notes. Sarah and Jessica followed suit. Emma remained frozen in her seat until Mr. Patterson looked at her expectantly. "Emma, you're in this group too." Every head in the classroom turned to watch as Emma stood and walked to the front of the room. Her hands were shaking slightly, and she clasped them together to hide the tremor. Madison had positioned herself at the center of their presentation area, naturally assuming the role of leader. "Emma will be starting us off," Madison announced with false cheerfulness, gesturing toward Emma like a game show host revealing a disappointing prize. She did all the research on the first day of battle. This was a lie. Emma had done research on the entire 3-day battle because Madison had divided up the work at their last group meeting and then never contacted Emma about her assigned portion. Emma had learned long ago not to trust Madison's organizational skills, so she had prepared material on all aspects of Gettysburg just in case. But standing in front of 29 judgmental teenagers with no prepared notes because she had expected to present later in the sequence, Emma felt her carefully constructed defenses crumbling. Emma started, her voice barely audible. "Speak up," Mr. Patterson called from his desk. "Everyone needs to hear." Emma cleared her throat, forcing volume into her words. The Battle of Gettysburg took place over 3 days in July 1863. It was a turning point in the Civil War because it stopped General Lee's invasion of the North. It was basic information, the kind of summary found in any textbook. Emma knew so much more, had filled pages of notes with details about troop movements and strategic decisions, but her mind had gone blank under the weight of so many staring eyes. Madison sighed dramatically. "That's incredibly basic, Emma. We all know when it happened. Can you tell us something actually interesting?" The question was designed to fluster her, and it worked. Emma's mouth opened and closed uselessly. She could feel sweat prickling at her hairline. "Like maybe why it mattered?" Madison prompted, her tone suggesting she was talking to a particularly slow child. "The casualties," Emma managed. "Over 50,000 soldiers were killed or wounded in 3 days. It was the bloodiest battle of the war." "And?" Madison pressed. And it stopped the Confederate advance. After Gettysburg, the South was never able to launch another major offensive into Northern territory. Emma's voice was growing steadier as she accessed the information she had studied. The battle also had significant psychological impact on both sides. The Union victory boosted Northern morale while devastating Southern confidence. Madison cut her off. "Thank you, Emma. That's probably enough." She turned to face the class, dismissing Emma with the efficiency of someone swatting a fly. Sarah will now discuss the second day of battle, which was actually the most strategically important. Emma stood awkwardly to the side, uncertain whether she was supposed to return to her seat or remain standing. Mr. Patterson gave her a small nod, indicating she should stay with her group. The presentation continued with Sarah reading from carefully prepared note cards, her delivery smooth and rehearsed. Jessica followed with a section on the third day, complete with a handout that she distributed to the class. Emma had seen none of this preparation. She had not been invited to any group meetings beyond the initial assignment. When Sarah mentioned our extensive research and Jessica referred to the hours we spent at the library together, Emma realized with creeping horror that they had deliberately excluded her from the actual work while planning to make her look unprepared in front of everyone. Madison concluded the presentation with a polished summary that included a visual aid she had created, a detailed map of the battlefield with color-coded positions. It was impressive, professional, and completely inaccessible to Emma, who had never been told this component existed. "Excellent work, team," Mr. Patterson said, making notes on his grading sheet. Though I would have liked to see Emma contribute more substantively to the presentation. Emma felt 29 pairs of eyes turned to her, most filled with the kind of second-hand embarrassment people feel when witnessing someone else's failure. Madison's expression was pure manufactured sympathy. "We tried to include her, Mr. Patterson, but Emma kept missing our study sessions. We ended up having to do most of the work ourselves." It was a masterful lie, delivered with just enough regret to sound believable. Emma opened her mouth to protest, to explain that she had never been told about any study sessions, but the words died in her throat. Who would believe her? Madison and her friends presented a united front, 3 credible witnesses against 1 scholarship student with everything to gain by lying. Mr. Patterson frowned slightly but did not pursue the issue. "Next time, make sure everyone is included in the planning process," he said, a weak admonishment that changed nothing. Emma returned to her seat, her face burning with humiliation. She could hear whispers starting around her, the rustle of judgment spreading through the classroom like wildfire. The rest of the class period passed in a blur. Emma stared at her notebook, unseeing, while other groups presented their projects. When the bell rang, she gathered her belongings with mechanical efficiency and headed for the door, desperate to escape. Madison caught up with her in the hallway. "That went well, don't you think?" Madison said brightly, as if they had just shared a successful collaboration. Emma did not respond. She did not trust herself to speak without her voice breaking. "Oh, don't be mad," Madison continued, falling into step beside Emma despite obvious signals that her presence was unwanted. "You did fine. Basic, but fine. Not everyone can be a natural presenter." They passed the cafeteria entrance, where the smell of overpriced pizza and French fries wafted into the hallway. Emma's stomach growled audibly, a reminder that she had skipped breakfast to leave early and avoid seeing her father's exhausted face after another overnight haul. Madison heard it too. Her eyes lit up with malicious delight. "Are you hungry? You should eat. Oh wait, I forgot. You can't afford lunch here, can you?" Emma's jaw tightened. "I have lunch. A sad little sandwich your daddy made for you." Madison's voice was saccharine. How adorable. Something inside Emma snapped. It was not a dramatic explosion, more like a cable stretched too tight finally reaching its breaking point. She stopped walking and turned to face Madison directly, meeting her eyes for the first time that day. "What do you want from me, Madison? What did I ever do to you?" The hallway around them had gone quiet. Students slowed their pace, sensing drama, eager for the entertainment of confrontation. Madison's smile widened. This was what she wanted. Emma pushed beyond her careful self-control. "You exist," Madison said simply. "You walk around this school pretending you belong here when everyone can see you don't. You make us look bad just by being in the same building. This school used to mean something, used to be for people who mattered. Now they let anyone in as long as they can fill some diversity quota." The words were designed to wound, and they struck true. Emma felt them like physical blows, each one landing with precision in the tender places she tried so hard to protect. "I earned my place here," Emma said, her voice low and dangerous. "I had a 4.0 GPA at my old school. I scored in the 99th percentile on the entrance exam. I didn't buy my way in like you did." The crowd around them inhaled collectively. No one talked to Madison Pierce like that. Madison's expression darkened. "You think grades make you special? You think working hard makes you better than me?" She stepped closer, invading Emma's personal space with deliberate aggression. "News flash, scholarship girl. No one cares how smart you are if you're poor. Intelligence without resources is just potential that dies unfulfilled. Your best-case scenario is maybe getting into a state school and graduating, with crushing debt to work some middle management job where you'll spend your whole life wishing you could afford the life people like me were born into." Emma's hands curled into fists at her sides. "At least I'll earn what I have. At least I'll know I'm not just coasting on my parents' money." It was the wrong thing to say. Emma knew it the moment the words left her mouth. Madison's eyes went cold, truly cold, in a way Emma had never seen before. "You want to compare parents?" Madison said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "My mother runs a charity that provides housing for people like you. My father's company employs hundreds of people, including probably some of your relatives. Our family's contributions to this community mean something. What does your family contribute? A truck driver who barely graduated high school and a dead mom who couldn't even stick around to raise you?" The mention of Emma's mother was a line crossed into cruelty so profound that the watching students shifted uncomfortably. Emma's mother had died 3 years ago from cancer, a slow and painful decline that had drained their savings and left Emma and her father emotionally shattered. It was public knowledge, recorded in Emma's school files, a tragedy that Madison was now weaponizing for the sake of winning an argument. Emma felt the hallway tilt slightly, her vision narrowing to tunnel focus on Madison's satisfied face. She did not trust herself to speak, did not trust what might come out if she opened her mouth. So she turned and walked away, pushing through the crowd that parted reluctantly, their hungry eyes following her retreat. Madison called after her, "That's right, run away. That's all you're good at." Emma walked faster, then broke into a run, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. She ran past the lockers, past the administrative offices, past the trophy cases filled with evidence of Westridge Academy's storied success. She ran until she reached the back exit that led to the student parking lot, a sprawling expanse of luxury vehicles that represented more wealth than Emma would likely see in her lifetime. She pushed through the heavy metal door and stumbled into the afternoon sunshine, gasping for air. The parking lot was mostly empty during lunch period. A few seniors with off-campus lunch privileges were heading toward their cars, but they paid no attention to the freshman girl trying to catch her breath against the brick wall. Emma slid down the wall until she was sitting on the cold concrete, her knees pulled up to her chest. The tears came then, hot and angry, a release of 2 years of accumulated poison. She cried for her mother, who had promised to see her graduate high school and never got the chance. She cried for her father, who worked himself to exhaustion trying to provide opportunities he never had. She cried for herself, for the girl who had believed that if she just worked hard enough, was good enough. She could transcend her circumstances. She cried until she had no tears left, until her eyes were swollen and her throat was raw. Then she wiped her face with the sleeve of her mother's coat and tried to collect herself. She had to go back inside. She had 3 more classes to survive. But as Emma stood and prepared to face the remainder of her day, she did not see the figure watching from across the parking lot. Parked under a large oak tree, straddling a massive black Harley-Davidson motorcycle, sat a man who had observed the entire scene through the school's windows. His name was Marcus Stone, though most people knew him by his road name, Iron. He was 47 years old, built like a wall of muscle and scar tissue, with a gray-streaked beard and arms covered in faded tattoos that told stories of a violent youth, redeemed by the Brotherhood of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. Marcus had been sitting in the Westridge parking lot for the past 30 minutes, waiting for his nephew to finish band practice. He had watched through the windows as the blonde girl systematically destroyed the black girl in the hallway. He had watched the crowd gather and disperse. He had watched Emma run to the parking lot and collapse. Now he sat on his bike, his weathered hands gripping the handlebars, and made a decision that would change multiple lives. Marcus knew bullying. He had been both victim and perpetrator in his younger days, before prison, before the Angels, before he learned that real strength was about protecting people weaker than yourself, not exploiting them. He had spent the last 15 years of his life trying to atone for the man he used to be, mentoring at-risk youth, speaking at schools about gang violence, using his fearsome appearance and hard-won wisdom to steer kids away from the path that had nearly destroyed him. He also knew that the black girl sitting alone in the parking lot, crying in her worn coat, was in real danger. Not immediate physical danger, but the slower, more insidious danger of a spirit being systematically broken. Marcus had seen it before, seen how bullying could hollow someone out until they made desperate choices. He had lost friends to suicide. He had lost friends to violence. He had lost friends to the numbness that came from believing you did not matter. He pulled out his phone and made a call. The voice that answered was gruff. "Yeah?" "Bishop, it's Marcus. I need you to run a plate for me." Marcus read off the license plate number of a silver Mercedes parked prominently in the front row of the student lot, the kind of car that screamed wealth and privilege. "Give me everything. Owner, address, financials, if you can get them." There was a pause. "You getting into something?" Bishop asked, concern evident despite the gruff tone. "Just looking out for someone," Marcus said. "Someone who needs protection. One of ours?" "Not yet," Marcus said, his eyes still on Emma's retreating figure as she forced herself to walk back toward the school entrance. "But she's someone's daughter, and she's being hunted. I'll call you back in 20, Bishop said, and disconnected. Marcus pocketed his phone and continued to watch. He had learned a long time ago that sometimes the universe put you in specific places at specific times for reasons you did not understand until later. He was meant to be here today. He was meant to see what he saw. And now he was meant to do something about it. When his nephew finally emerged from the school building 20 minutes later, tuba case in hand, Marcus was still sitting on his bike, lost in thought. "You okay, Uncle Marcus?" the boy asked, noticing the intensity of his uncle's expression. Marcus looked at his nephew, a good kid trying to navigate the complicated world of high school with all its social landmines. "Do you know a girl named Emma?" Marcus asked. "Emma Davis?" "I don't know her last name." "Black girl, about your height, wearing an old brown coat. Quiet." The nephew's expression clouded. "Oh yeah, Emma Davis. She's in my English class. Madison Pierce's target." "Madison Pierce?" "The blonde girl whose dad basically owns the school. The nephew explained, adjusting his grip on the heavy instrument case. "She's been making Emma's life hell for like 2 years. Everyone knows about it, but nobody does anything because Madison's dad is on the board." Marcus's jaw tightened. "And the teachers? They pretend not to see it. Or they blame Emma for being sensitive. Standard stuff." The casual way his nephew described it, standard stuff, made Marcus's blood pressure rise. This was what children now considered normal, ritualized cruelty so embedded in school culture that it was simply accepted as the cost of admission. "Get on," Marcus said, gesturing to the back of the bike. As they rode away from Westridge Academy, Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it until they reached his nephew's house, helped the kid get his tuba inside, and then checked the message from Bishop. What he read made his hands clench into fists. Madison Pierce's father, Richard Pierce, was not just wealthy. He was predatory. The information Bishop had dug up revealed a pattern of discrimination lawsuits, all settled quietly with non-disclosure agreements. There were allegations of housing discrimination, employment discrimination, and 2 separate investigations by civil rights organizations that had been mysteriously dropped. Richard Pierce was a man who used his money to escape consequences, a man who had built an empire on the backs of people he considered beneath him. And he had clearly passed those values down to his daughter. Marcus sat on his bike outside his nephew's house and made another call, this time to the chapter president of the Hells Angels. "Ax, I need to talk to you about something. We have a situation." The Westridge Academy cafeteria at lunchtime was a carefully orchestrated social hierarchy made visible. The popular kids claimed the tables by the windows, bathed in natural light that seemed to spotlight their importance. The athletes occupied the center tables, loud and boisterous, performing their dominance through volume and physicality. The various niche groups, the artists, the debate team, the theater kids, carved out their territories along the walls. And Emma Davis sat alone at a small table in the far corner, partially hidden behind a structural pillar. She unpacked her lunch with the efficiency of someone who had done this countless times. A peanut butter sandwich in a reused plastic bag, an apple that was slightly bruised, a bottle of water refilled from the fountain. It was not the meal itself that marked her as different, but the solitude with which she consumed it. At Westridge, eating alone was a sign of social failure, a mark of being unwanted. Emma had learned to treat lunch as a functional necessity rather than a social event. She ate quickly, mechanically, while reading a library book propped open against her backpack. Today it was To Kill a Mockingbird, a story about injustice and moral courage that felt both comforting and painfully relevant. She was 3 pages into chapter 12 when the tray slammed down on her table. Emma looked up to find Madison standing over her, flanked as always by Sarah and Jessica. Several other students had followed them over, drawn by the promise of entertainment. "This is a private table," Emma said quietly, already knowing the objection was futile. "Private? In a public cafeteria?" Madison laughed, the sound carrying across the large room. "That's precious. No, see, we're doing you a favor. We noticed you always eat alone, and we thought maybe you'd appreciate some company." Emma recognized the trap immediately, but had no way to avoid it. Leaving would confirm her weakness. Staying meant enduring whatever Madison had planned. She chose to stay, closing her book and meeting Madison's gaze steadily. "What do you want?" "Just to chat," Madison said, sliding into the seat across from Emma with exaggerated casualness. Sarah and Jessica sat on either side, boxing Emma in. "We're curious about you. You're so mysterious, always hiding in corners with your books and your sad little lunches." "I like to read," Emma said, her voice neutral. "Of course you do." Very scholarly. Madison reached across the table and picked up Emma's sandwich, examining it with theatrical disgust. "Is this really what you eat every day?" Just peanut butter? No jelly, no honey, no nothing? I like peanut butter. How tragic. Madison set the sandwich down, but not in its original position. She moved it to the edge of the table, close to falling. Sarah, didn't your mom pack you extra food today? You should share with Emma. She clearly needs it. Sarah pulled an elaborate bento box from her designer lunch bag, the kind of meal that cost more to assemble than Emma's family spent on groceries in a week. I have sushi rolls if you want some, Sarah offered, her voice dripping with false concern. Emma shook her head. I'm fine, thanks. Don't be proud, Madison said, pushing the bento box closer to Emma. Seriously, take some. We're trying to help you. I said I'm fine. Emma's voice had an edge now, a warning that went unheeded. The problem with people like you, Madison said, leaning back in her chair like she was settling in for a lecture, is that you're too proud to accept help. That's why you'll always struggle. Successful people know how to accept generosity and network with people who can elevate them. I don't need elevation from people who treat kindness like a weapon, Emma replied, surprising herself with her directness. The watching crowd murmured appreciatively. Madison's eyes narrowed. Careful. You're in no position to insult people trying to befriend you. Is that what this is? Friendship? Madison smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. It could be, if you learned some gratitude. For example, you could thank me for carrying you through that history presentation this morning. Carrying me? Emma's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. You deliberately excluded me from the planning and then made me look incompetent in front of everyone. That's your perception. My perception is that you failed to communicate and participate, leaving the rest of us to pick up your slack. Madison turned to address the gathered students. Isn't that right? Emma was supposed to handle research, but she never came to any meetings.